Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares the stories of firefighters, emergency personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. And now I'd like to introduce you to your host for Burnt Out, a 33-year retired veteran of the fire department, Skip O.
Thanks, Sean, for that introduction. We appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to our podcast, Burnout Podcast. And we want to welcome this Sandman's in the house. Sandman, thank you for being on here today.
Well, thank you, Skip. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Well, also, we'd like to thank our sponsors. You can go to burnoutpodcast.org and you can find more information about our sponsors. And we appreciate anybody that's on duty listening. We're here to help people with any kind of mental health or anything. We're going to share our brokenness so you may be able to walk through the doors and get help yourself. So, Sandman, could you give us a little background about yourself, your marriage life, your job, and all that good stuff before we get started?
Absolutely. I've been married to my current wife now for about 3.5 years. Be 4 years in July. And she is truly the one that saved my life twice. First time getting me to the Center of Excellence, and second time when I had my bout with kidney cancer just a few months ago. I've been a paramedic for almost 30 years. I've been a firefighter just about that long. I've been with my current department about 18, 19 years now. Looking forward to the day when I can actually say, yep, I'm done and ready to retire.
Man, you had a long career. You're an old guy like me.
Yep.
Well, I tell you what, when you first got your paramedic's license, when you first got on an ambulance, what was your what inspired you to go that direction?
I grew up in a cop house. My dad was a police officer. I have two uncles that were police officers. And, so being a public servant was definitely in the cards. I had another uncle that was a volunteer firefighter. He's actually the one that got me involved in EMS and first aid. I actually, when I graduated high school, had a scholarship for a nursing program. Basically pissed that away because I went and partied and all that good stuff that freshmen do in college. And then came home and, I realized second semester of college that this was not for me. And I had some paramedic friends that I had worked with, volunteering with, and called them and talked to them and got their input and got into an EMT class. This was 1991. Got into a paramedic class in 92, 93, got my license and started working for a small private ambulance service in St. Louis, and cut my teeth in the city of St. Louis, doing either transfers or 911 backup for St. Louis City EMS, and just fell in love with it.
Tell me about your, I remember one of my first runs, but, and I'm not telling you bad or good. When you had your first runs, how'd that make you feel?
Oh, I was scared shitless, Skip.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I was scared shitless. Fortunately, like I said, we probably had our call ratios probably 80% transfers and 20% emergency calls. And working in the city and being in the areas that I was in, that scared feeling left rather quickly. And then, just as, the confidence grew, and, it wasn't, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. I was pretty much, on my own with an EMT partner instead of a paramedic partner. And within a year and a half of working there, I was already promoted to supervisor. So,
Wow. And that's, was you still an EMT at the time? Hadn't took medic school yet?
no, I was a paramedic.
Okay.
I went right from EMT to paramedic. My EMT instructor took over the paramedic class, and basically she asked me, she goes, "So you're going to take paramedic class next semester?" I said, "No, I'm going to take a year off and work." And she goes, "No, I don't think you understand. You're going to be in the next paramedic class."
One of those people.
Yes, and I love her dearly. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
she was an awesome instructor, and I learned so much from her. Um, and of course, back then, Skip, as you know, the class was only a year long, 2 semesters at most, and then if it went any longer, it's because of clinical time. And I was finished in 2 semesters in 2 weeks. So,
Well, I tell you, lots changed since back when we did our thing.
oh yeah.
Could you kind of go through the years, like far as the struggles, not specifically any one run, but the struggles of you being a paramedic going into the fire service that you've had through the years?
The biggest one happened when I was still in St. Louis, and it was, we all have the call, and it was my first dealings with really anything of a serious nature. We had one of the ambulances, one of my crews caused a multiple fatality accident. I'm not going to go into great detail on it, but it quite honestly, it fucked me up. I got a real bad case of the I don't cares. After that, my boss called me into his office after I'd cleaned myself up. Um, and he said, "Do you realize how close you were to losing your job?" And I said, "No." I said, "I don't." I said, "But I understand." I said, and I was able at that time to pick myself up by my bootstraps and uh, and continue working in the capacity that I was able to before. Um, and of course, this was in the infancy of CISD, and it funny that the CISD leader was my paramedic instructor. So, but they did it, 24 to 48 hours afterwards. But that was it. There was no follow up care after that. There was no phone calls. There was no, "Hey, if you need any help, call this number and we'll get you more help." It was a one time deal.
So, Sandman, some people, when you use that brief, that's a critical incident debriefing.
Yeah.
And then that's what they do when something happens. They come up, debrief you, check you out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So back then it was, within 24 to 48 hours of the incident, it was, you and everybody else that was involved in it, and two, usually other paramedics or firefighters. They would come in, and then we'd just sit and talk about the call and, and get feelings out. And, it was good. It was a good start, but there was no traction to it. And it just that was it.
So from that point, you're going forward. What's happened the next few years after that?
Well, like I said, the next few years after that, I got a real bad case of the I don't cares. Didn't care about work, didn't care about anything. My drinking was more than social, we'll say. Probably 3 or 4 years after that call, I woke up in my bed in my house, did not realize how I got home. In fact, went so far as to go outside and check my car to make sure I didn't hit anything. Um, and it was at that point that I was like, you know what? Maybe I need to stop drinking so heavily. And I did, and I was able to control that. But as you know, being in any program at all, if you're having an addiction to one thing, something else has got to fill that void. And for me, once I curbed the drinking, it wasn't drugs, it was pornography, and it was sex, and it was, when, where, and how am I going to get my next fix? And the internet was still fairly young, fairly new, and so there wasn't quite as much as many porn sites as there are now. But I was able to find them, and then of course you could still go down to the corner store and get your magazines or whatever you wanted. So I was able to get my fix and all that. So it was, like I said, I replaced one addiction with
Well, I
another.
tell you, I can relate with you a lot. It's like that old mold machine. It pops up. You hit one thing down, something else pops up. Literally,
Right. Right.
alcohol, drugs, sex, buying material things to make us happy. Trying to do those jumping out of airplanes. I used to do that. Things like that to get that adrenaline rush. What dark road did that take you down? I mean,
Oh wow. Um, yeah, it led me down to depression. Uh, so much so that I was sitting cleaning my guns one night and sitting in my living room, and I thought, I could just end it all right now, be done with it. And the thought that came through my mind was, what stopped me was no, because then my dad's going to have to clean up this mess because nobody else will, and so that stopped me that time from doing it. Uh, but I thought I could. I thought I was strong enough because I had controlled the alcohol problem that I could control this, and this was a whole different demon. This was for me, alcohol was the first circle of hell. Porn is like the center for me. It's a daily struggle even today. Some days are way better than others, but there are days where I'm just like, so easy that I could just jump on that website and look at whatever I wanted to look at.
absolutely. One thing we do, you got people you can call. Like for alcohol and drugs, you got if it's a 12-step program, you got your sponsors, you got your friends you can call about it. What I found out with this, it's more embarrassing to make that phone call or to talk about it. And first of all, I want to tell you thank you for coming on here and talking about that, because that takes a lot of courage. Because I've talked to a lot of people, have my own personal struggles with that they're afraid to talk about that. So thank you for coming on here and sharing that. So we know what the problem is and the triggers, the struggles. When and where did you go get help eventually?
So I left St. Louis in 2002 and moved to Kansas City and married my first wife. Um, we had a daughter, which I'm estranged from right now, trying to work on that relationship. Um, thought I had it under control. Again, didn't. Had an affair, an actual physical affair, and that pretty much ended that marriage. We tried counseling, we tried things. At that point in time, I still felt I didn't have a problem. I thought, this is normal behavior. This is what what happens. Got a divorce 2013, and then was single until I met my wife in 2018. My wife now. Um, and again, being single, it was party time. It was, you know, I don't want to say a different woman every night, but it seemed like it sometimes. I was just able to. I was enjoying life again, or so I thought. Met my wife. And it's funny. One of the first questions she asked me was, "Do you have any PTSD issues?" And I said, "Oh no, I'm solid. God, no. What are you talking about? PTSD?
Liar!
Right? Huge red flag. Huge red flag. 3 or 4 more red flags. Yeah, and I said, no, 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 no. I'm good. I'm solid. I got it all under control. Well, I didn't, because the porn you know, was part of the PTSD issue. It was, my escape from my other demons that were coming in. So finally, my wife had had enough. It was shortly after we got married. We were barely married. I don't even think we were married a year yet. No, were just married a year, just a little over a year. And she turned to me and said, "This was in September's a big month for me apparently. Since September, she goes, you are either going to get help or you're out of here. We're done." And I I was smart enough to realize that this was the woman that I needed in my life for the rest of my life. Um, Again, not really thinking I had that big of an issue. I kind of dragged my feet a little bit. Got a hold of a therapist that works with our union. She looked for places around the Kansas City area. And I said, well, I'm going to look into Center of Excellence. And within 20, 30 minutes of that conversation, she sent me a text back saying, yeah, she goes, keep looking at Center of Excellence, talk to them. Um, and she says she thinks that would be a better fit for me. So middle of September, I called them, had an initial start date of going there September 27th. Something happened. Somebody needed a few more days. I'm not sure what happened. Ended up October 6th, I got there. My wife dropped me off at the airport. It was at that time we lived maybe 10 minutes from the airport. That was the longest 10 minutes of my life. It was the quietest 10 minutes of my life. Um, she dropped me off, said good luck, pretty much. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went. I told her I loved her. I don't know if she said it back at that time because she was, at that point, she was like, if you come back, you come back. If you don't, you don't. And she was at that point. So I got on the plane and made it to Center of Excellence. And it was funny because the intake nurse, when I did the breathalyzer, just kind of chuckled and said, "You're the first person that's ever blown a 0.0."
I tell you, when you said earlier, you said it was the quietest ride, and was she talking to anybody, or did anybody give her direction how to work with you on this?
No, and that's something that we have struggled with. I got the help. I was in my bubble, as you know. At COE, we're in our bubble. Nobody reached out to her while I was there. Maybe a friend or two now and then, but that was it. And I'm a member of our peer counselor, peer support, peer counselors, whatever you want to call them, here for our local. And we had a meeting not too long ago, and I brought that up. And they're because I asked questions. I said, "What can we do to make things better?" And I told them, I said, we need to help the family. If we send somebody to a treatment center, we need to send 2 or 3 people to that house and say, what do you need? What can we do to help you? Not, hey, if you need any help, call. Because as you know, we're proud people. Even our family members are proud, and they're not going to call.
Well, and some of what I've learned through working, some are embarrassed. They don't want, how our wives, our spouses, whether it's man, woman, we want to cover, when we're late to work because we've been drinking too much, or when this happens or this happens, they want to cover. And it's hard for them because they're embarrassed. And I think, like you, be proactive, go to the house. Hey, we love you. We care about you. And if you can find somebody that went through the same thing, that'll help them lower the guard too. What do you think about that, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being proactive instead of reactive is always better. It's just like, when we fight a fire, Skip, we don't just stand out in the front yard and wait for it to burst through the door. We burst through the door and put it out that way. We're proactive on the fire scene. we need to be proactive with mental health, with addictions. We need to reach out, and if we know that somebody's going to a treatment facility center, that we need to reach out and show up on their front door and say, hey, we're here to help. What can we do? And sit down and get a game plan going.
Sure, that's a good thought. One thing that we're real good sometimes at doing that here on our department, or I heard other places, the thing is to stay with it.
Right.
When something happens, you get a bunch of people there, and then you got to stay with them after that. Not just a one and done kind of thing.
No, absolutely.
It's
absolutely.
Day in and day out. Like I think you were suggesting something too about earlier. You had a mentor, and when you was going through the cancer thing, we need to have our mentors for our families and for our own people too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And whether that's, through peer support, through the peer support group that we have, or, even if it's your captain going to your house and saying, hey, we know, I'm just going to use me as an example. We know Steve is away. What can we do to help? Do you need the grass mowed? Do you need us to go grocery shopping for you? What do you need us to do?
No, that's good stuff right there. So you got dropped off at the center, and the work begins. Can you give us a little glimpse about your time at the Center of Excellence in Maryland?
Absolutely. So 2020, October of 2020, COVID's in full swing. So it was 48 hours of quarantine, and I was chomping at the bit. I realized, through that flight and that long drive up there, I needed the help, and I was ready. I was ready to accept it. I was ready to get this work going. The first person that I really had any conversations with outside of the health staff was Mark Radigan, and he came in. And Mark, I love Mark, love him to death. That man needs to, if he ever decides to retire or quit the Center of Excellence, he needs to put on leadership classes, because that man is a true leader from the front. I've seen him sweep floors. I've seen him wipe off tables. I've seen him dish out food. And he asked, "What can I do for you guys? What can I get you?" And I said, I don't have. It was a stupid. It's the water bottle. I said, I didn't get a water bottle. And he goes, I can get you that. It's not a problem. He goes, what name do you want on it? And I said, Sandman. And he kind of looks at me and goes, what? And I said, Sandman, Sandman. And he goes, all right, we'll put it on there. And then from that, anytime he'd see me, it was, hey, Sandman, hey, the Sandman, and the connection that him and I made, which I'm sure he makes with everybody, it was just, I knew it was the right place. I knew it was the right fit. Going forward from there, getting out, one of the other first people that I met was Marissa, who, as you know, on Worldwide Peer Support, and her and I had a very nice conversation, and about everything, because I was ready for quarantine to be over with. I was sitting out in front of there, and we were just talking, and it was nice. And talking to everybody out there, they all said the same thing. You got to work it. You got to stay with it. You got to work it. It works. First couple of weeks, actually, it was within the first week, I had one of my first major aha moments, and I was so excited to tell my wife about it and all this, and I didn't have the words to tell her, and it was about radical acceptance. And the way that I explained it was not the right way, and it made her mad. It was not the right words, and I did not have the right words, and I was turned what was essentially a very good conversation into a very bad conversation and a very bad feeling. Of course, at this time, we're still a week or two into it. She's still, extremely hurt, and So for me to say, oh yeah, well I've learned about this radical acceptance where I've kind of forgiven myself and all this, and she goes, oh, so you've forgiven yourself for what you've done, and I'm like, oh wait a minute here, boy, did I just stepped in, and the more I talked, the deeper the hole got, and um, finally I just said, you know what, until I have a better grasp of what I'm learning, I'm not going to. And she goes, that's a very good idea.
I tell you, it's my filters don't work all the time. I know what I mean to say, and I know what I actually say, and I screw it up a lot. My wife
Oh yeah.
is educated me quite a bit through the 30 years I've been married.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just in the 3.5 years that I've been married, my wife has educated me as well. Um, and going forward, just learning why I did the things that I did. Um, I had some great clinicians, um, both paid and around the campfire. Um, found my way back to God again. That was missing. And I think that was a big part of my recovery, and it's still a big part of my recovery, my ongoing aftercare. Um, Getting back into some sort of church, and we've kind of bounced around with that, and I think we finally found one. Um, but at least knowing that that aspect of it needs to be attended to as well really helps.
So, kind of like mind, body, and spirit, the trilogy, having all those three aligned gives you a better life. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Mind, body, and spirit.
Sure. I tell you, for me, it took a while. I could take the alcohol away, the drugs, and the other stuff away, but as far as that spirit, higher power, or boot, whatever you want to call it,
Whatever you call
I
it.
didn't want to hear nothing about it for 5 years that I was sober. I tried to deny it, fight it, and it kept coming up through meetings I'd go to, people I'd talk to, through my kids, through whatever. It just kept coming up. And then when I finally accepted it, a God of my understanding, whatever made sense to me, then that's when I started growing spiritually, getting stronger foundation in my recovery, not just with sobriety, but my recovery in other areas like the sexual addiction, the different other things.
Right.
But I like how you express that. You got back into it and got into a church that helped you spiritually.
Yeah. So I was in the center for 6 weeks and went through, family therapy and my own personal therapy and group therapy um, and then campfire therapy and um, so when it was time to come home, my wife picked me up at the airport, and she said immediately she knew there was a change, and she could see it in just the way that I walked across the airport. Um, of course, at this time we've been talking the whole time, and things went from very limited conversations to better and better and better and better conversations. Um, Got out of the COE, found one counselor who was not a good fit at all, and then finally found one that I go to now. I went to him probably I think once a week when I first got back. Then we kind of scaled it back to once every 2 weeks, and now I go once a month as a maintenance. Of course, if I have issues or if I screw up, I can go. Um, I would like to say that since I've been back from COE, that everything has been great. No, I've had a couple of missteps since I've been back, but they've just been that. They've been missteps, and I've corrected and figured out, what I need to do to stay on the right track. So,
Sure. I heard somewhere it's progress, not perfection.
right, yeah, I think somebody I know said
Yeah,
that.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
I tell you, since you've been back though, you've had your growth experiences, and then a few months ago you had another experience that happened to you. Could you go into that a little bit, and then we'll.
Absolutely. Because this is this is just as big a part of my story as the other stuff. Um, so September 3rd, I was at work, came into work, no problems. As the day went on, I started developing leg pain, and it got to the point about 9 o'clock at night that I couldn't walk. So I couldn't do my job. So I told my driver, I said, "Hey," I said, "I can't walk." I said, "I need to go to the hospital." And she was like, "Okay." And then went to my captain and I told her, I said, "Can't walk." I said, "I need to go to the hospital." She's like, "Okay." So we called the nurse like we're supposed to, and then I called my wife. Now I had been hurt on the job a year or two before with a knee injury, nothing serious, thank God. Um, and I told my wife, I said, "No, you don't need to meet me at the hospital. Be all right." We didn't have that conversation this time. I said, "I'll see you when you get there." And so I got there. Um, and of course, it's the local hospital that we take all of our patients to. Um, so I know a lot of the ER staff. I know especially the doctors, and I knew both doctors that were on. Um, the one doctor that took my case was a good friend, a good acquaintance. Not I don't. It's not like we go and hang out, but we talk and we're friendly to each other, and we kind of know, So I felt very comfortable with him being my doctor. So my wife Lisa, the doctor came in and she speaks up and she says, "Do me a favor, don't just dope him up and send him on his way. Find out what is causing this leg pain because this is a 10 plus. This is the worst pain I've ever had. I've had kidney stones. I've had an appendix almost burst. And this is the worst pain that I have ever had." So the doctor was like, "Yeah, absolutely. No problem." So kind of cut to the chase. Went in and got a CT scan and came back. And about 45 minutes later, the doctor comes in and says, "Well, we got the results of your CT scan." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "We need to talk." And, you know, it's one thing if you hear that from your wife or from your parents, but when you hear it from a doctor, you're like, "Oh, what the fuck now?" And he says, "We found a 7 to 8 centimeter mass on your right kidney. We're calling it stage 2 renal cell carcinoma until we, can prove otherwise." Um, Still, at this point, have not gotten my pain under control, and I was on some pretty heavy narcotics. Was taking, I think, at that time, I think I was taking 1 milligram of Dilaudid every hour. They finally upped it to 2 milligrams of Dilaudid every hour. 20 milligrams of Oxy every 6 hours, and then a muscle relaxant every 12. Um, and I was still able to carry on a conversation. In fact, I did a FaceTime with one of the guys from Worldwide Peer Support, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "Oh," because I was in the hospital. He saw the hospital gown, and I told him what was going on. Um, so I spent almost a week in the hospital, between different tests, trying to figure out what was causing the pain, getting scans done for that, and then MRIs to exactly see just how big this tumor was, and they all came back 7 to 8 centimeters. Um, so the doctor had a great urologist. He was awesome. I can't say enough about this man. Scheduled a surgery for September 22nd. Went into the hospital on that day. As we're pulling up to the hospital, there are 2 fire trucks, 3 ambulances, and a chief buggy, excuse me, sitting outside waiting for me. And the whole shift was there. My whole shift was there. Uh, and even a couple people that weren't on shift were there. And one of the things that really kind of fucked with my head was that prior to going into COE was that, I've been hurt, I've been injured, and nobody checked on me, but yet we can go, not comparing anything, but we do all this other stuff for other people. Why isn't anything being done for me? It was a pity party, is what it was. But after seeing that, I'm like, okay, you know, maybe I am, thought of a little more than I think. Go in. Um, so a funny thing is, you got to get shaved down. Well, I'm a hairy beast, and the gal came in with a little razor, and I just kind of giggled, and my wife goes, "Oh, that's cute." And the gal was like, "What do you mean?" And I raised up the gal, and she goes, "Oh, I'll be right back." So she comes back with the actual clippers, does the front. She goes, "Okay, so we got to do the back now too." So the doctor wants all the way back to the spine. I said, "Okay." I rolled over, and the gal goes, "Oh my." So one of the things, and one of the things that my wife and I have decided is that we're going to laugh as much as we can. We've both cried enough over my bullshit, over everything else, and I know people were looking, especially when I was in, just after the diagnosis. We're looking into our room like, oh my God, why are they laughing? He's got a diagnosis of cancer, and we got this unknown pain, and they're in there laughing and having a, because that's what we did. That's what we decided to do. Um, so they took the kidney. Um, According to the urologist, we got it all. The pathology report came back saying it was all encapsulated in the kidney. October 20th, went to the oncologist, and in a 5-minute visit, she said no further treatment is needed.
Cancer free.
Cancer free. So our it's one of those things where it's just, God is good. There's a reason why God put that pain in my leg the day that he did. And he made it so severe, in my opinion, because he knows how hard headed I am. And he knows that that's the only way that I would get into the hospital is if I couldn't walk.
Well, Sam, man, that's a miracle. That's an amazing story. Not just you coming to courage and sharing your experience with the sexual addiction and then sharing this experience of hope. There's somebody listening right now, a first responder. They're sitting in their one-room apartment, or they're sitting there in a crowded room feeling alone. They got something going on with them between their ears, whether it's past runs or whether it's something they're struggling with, their marriage, not wanting to be alive. What are you going to tell them to do?
The light at the end of the tunnel is not a train. It's hope. You can get through this. You've survived 100% of your bad days so far. Reach out, call me, call anybody. If I can't help you personally, I will find someone that can. But don't think you're in this alone. This mental health stuff with first responders. It's a team sport. Somebody else I know said that too. Um, we're here for you. You're here for us. We can get everybody through this. All you have to do is call, and we'll be there.
That's great. That's awesome advice. Another thing that we like to ask here at Burnout, what's a phrase or quote that goes through your mind when you're struggling or that keeps you going? If the day seems to be hard, what's one of those quotes?
Oh God, Skip! There are so many because I'm a big movie and song person. I got a quote for just about everything, but one of the big ones for me, especially now dealing with the sex addiction, it's Proverbs 27:17, and it says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." And it just emphasizes that you're not in this alone. You can't do this alone. You need other people to help you. I've got on my locker, I've got a few phrases, and one of them is, "You can't do this alone. You need to go to the meetings. You need, you need other people to help you. I can't do this by
Absolutely.
myself."
Well, man, Sam, man, thank you again for coming on here and sharing your heart, sharing your brokenness, and also sharing your successes. And I'm grateful for you, your friendship, and for what you're going to do in the future for the Worldwide Peer Support. Let everybody know the Worldwide Peer Support has support meetings Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Anybody that can come on there, any first responder is welcome to come on there and reach out for help. You can sit there and listen, or you can talk and share your story. Also, too, you can go to burnoutpodcast.org if you want Sandman's information, and we can forward that information to you. If you want to know a little bit more details about his story, how he got help, you're more than welcome to go to burnoutpodcast.org. Until then, we thank everybody for listening. Go home tonight, shut your radio off, and get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Burnout. Burnout is brought to you by the Worldwide Peer Support. You can visit Burnout Podcast at burntoutpodcast.org or visit Worldwide Peer Support at worldwidepeersupport.org. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Executive producer Sean P. Neal. And produced by mypodcast.media.